Most of us have extremely limiting beliefs when it comes to growing older. And that is a pretty big problem because our belief system controls our behavior. And to a large degree, our behavior will determine our future. Our challenge is made even more difficult that we're also battling social norms, the unwritten rules about how we're supposed to act, the conformity police, if you will, enforcing the laws of age appropriate behavior. Growing bolder, of course, is about breaking nearly all of these societal norms that are related to aging because they've all been written by an ageist culture and because there really is no such thing as age appropriate behavior. Growing bolder is about you doing you. It's about continuing to grow, to evolve, and reinvent as you age. Welcome to the age of liberation, if not now, when? Which brings us to today's guest. She is pretty much the poster girl for reinvention, for fearless exploration of self. Lyn Slater is a cultural influencer. She's a model, a writer, a content creator, a former professor with a PhD, and who knows what the heck she's going to be in 10 years. You've likely heard her referred to as the Accidental Icon, which is a blog she started back in 2014 at the age of 61, which led to a sphere of influence that includes over 1 million online followers. She's been profiled and quoted by major publications and news outlets worldwide. And her new book, which brings her to us today, is a riveting personal memoir. It's called How to Be Old, Lessons in Living Boldly from the Accidental Icon. Welcome, Lyn Slater. Lyn, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
You know what? I'm better now. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're really, really busy, and I very much want to get to the lessons that you've learned, the message that you embody so well. But man, we got to set it up by going back maybe more than a decade. You were a professor in Fordham University's Graduate School of Social Service with no connection whatsoever to formal fashion, no thought whatsoever about becoming a global influencer. So how did that get started? What were the seeds of what has become Lyn Slater today?
Well, I think I've always been, since the time I was a small child, a reinventor. And throughout my career as a social worker, I would, because that work can be very intense, that I would, take a break and go outside of social work and take a class in some kind of creative sort of thing that had nothing to do with social work, like improv or creative writing. And I would really use that as a form of self-care. And then somehow it would find its way into my work. So I came upon one of those moments when I turned 60, and I started to take some classes in a fashion school and taking very random things like jewelry fabrication, sewing. And I ended up in this class called Building a Vintage Business. And all of the professors and all of the students, when I was walking around this fashion school, and I was pretty much the oldest person in the room, they would say, "You have really good style. You should start a fashion blog." So I kind of said, all right, I know how to write. I know how to research. I was very interested in writing in a more expressive way than you're allowed to write in academia. And so I said, all right, I can do this. I know how I can make a website. My partner can take photos. And I just started to do it as just a pleasure project and as a way to find out about an area that I did not know all that much about, which was fashion.
Well, I think there's some profound statements in there. First of all, as you said, you've always been a reinventor. So your willingness to get into something new, your lack of fear in joining a class in which you are the oldest, and obviously the inspiration, the encouragement, the support that you got from the younger students in the class. How important was that? Because I think we all talk about the importance of intergenerational connectivity. Was that critical for you at that stage, Lyn?
Well, it's been critical throughout my life. And so I am the oldest of 6. So I have always been with people who are younger than me. As a social worker, I worked with young people. As a professor, I taught young people. So just being around them was not something that I thought about in a purposeful way. And the interesting thing about my story is when I started Accidental Icon, I was not even thinking about my age. It had nothing to do with my age. It was how I had kind of negotiated my whole life when I felt like I needed a change. And so it really was the media that made my project about age. It was not my intention. I was not even really aware I was the oldest person in the room because I was so engaged in learning something new. And so, I never talked about age when I first started. I didn't write about age. And, the media started to write about me and they said, oh, look at her. She's involved in fashion and she's 62. Oh, look at her. She's good at social media. Oh, surprise. She's 64. So they really made it about my age. It was not me making it about my age.
It is unfortunate, and I have to plead guilty because, I'm one who longs for a culture in which age is no longer a relevant descriptor of anything. I agree with you 100%, but you've got to know, Lyn, that when you write a book with the title that you have, it's almost impossible to introduce you and not say your age in the first sentence. I'm guessing you've come to grips with that.
Well, I think I made, in the book, I talk about it that, if you look at the dictionary definition of the word old, it's someone who's lived a long time. That's a very neutral statement. Society puts all its stuff on that. I feel privileged to be alive and healthy at 70 years old. And so I decided to take that word old and kind of just reclaim it as part of my narrative in a way that I want to keep saying it until it gets drained of all of the negative connotations that society has put on it.
Well, as we would say back in the day, right on, Lyn Slater. All right, back to the blog, because you start a blog, you start an Instagram. It's 2014, not exactly setting the fashion world on fire yet, but there is a serendipitous happening at the Lincoln Center that really kind of ignited some things for you. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, that's a falsehood.
Uh-oh.
That the media perpetrated, that was what launched me into stardom. That was actually very shortly. It was like a week after I had published my first blog post, and I was meeting a friend for lunch at Lincoln Center, which was very close to the campus of Fordham where I taught. And I was wearing a Yohji Yamamoto suit, and a group of photographers and some journalists sort of came over and started taking my photo. So when my friend came up and saw it, she was joking and, she was saying, aha, the accidental icon strikes again. But it really wasn't until 2017 that I became sort of on the radar, the cultural radar. And there were a couple of posts that went viral. And that came about because I had gone on, I was just exploring a lot of fun, creative projects. I had no idea you could make money from this. That was not my intention. I was just having fun. And I went on this casting call, and it turned out to be for a Valentino eyewear ad. And so they basically said, well, if we, use your picture, we'll pay you $1,000. And, the photographer was Terry Richardson. And we went out, and it was twilight, and he was taking photos of me. And a few weeks later, they said, oh, we're going to use your photo. They sent me the check. And I didn't think anything more of it. And a couple months later, my phone started blowing up, and my friends were sending me photos of I was in a full page ad for Valentino eyewear in every major fashion magazine in the world. And that brought me to the attention of a modeling agent from Elite Models London, who I then signed with. And that is actually in 2017, not 2014, when I sort of blew up, so to speak.
Well, thank you for helping us get the chronology right. And you do write about that in your book, and it's fascinating that this agent who then reached out to you said, by the way, had I represented you at the time, you would have been paid $50,000 instead of $1,000, and you were off and running. Fair to say, Lyn, that you are a rebel of sorts, because, and again, I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you were one of the first influencers to flaunt gray hair, and really not just to embrace, but to celebrate aging. You've always projected this image of self-acceptance as opposed to, shame over the obvious signs of aging. Have you always been a rebel, and what do you rebel against mostly these days?
Well, yes, I've always been a rebel. My friends call me the good bad girl. And, anytime that I am being told how I have to be, or I'm being put in a box, or stereotyped, or categorized in any way that does not feel authentic to me, I will push back against that. And I think that's exactly what I did at sort of the later part of my book, when I felt like my narrative, which was about me being a writer and a creator and a blogger, and again, just being a woman interested in fashion, sort of my narrative kind of got hijacked as, oh, this is the poster girl for how we should all be aging right now. And that was not my story, because as I said, when I started this, I was not thinking about my age. And, like you, I believe that age is like anything else, it's socially constructed. And the way that I like to think about life is every single year and decade of my life, I have had opportunities, I have had challenges, I have had losses, I have had sickness, I have had health, and I have had to figure out, how do I respond to those things so I can move forward. To me, this part of my life is exactly the same. It's opportunities, it's challenges, it's sickness, it's health, it's loss. And the difference now is that I have this massive toolbox of experience, skills, memories, successes that I have accumulated over my lifetime. When I was 20, I had a hammer and a nail in my toolbox of problem solving. But now there's not much that throws me that I haven't seen before. So again, I feel like this time of my life is the same, but different. And it is encompassing all the things that happen to us over our lifetime.
We're talking with Lyn Slater, who has written a fascinating memoir called How to Grow Old. And Lyn, in the book, you talk more than once about risk taking, and certainly not about taking the kind of risk that would risk our health or our well-being, and not just risk in fashion, but in life. I mean, you write more than once that it was taking risk and screwing up that actually led to your adventures and success. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think most of us, as we get older, are certainly reinforced by culture to get on the couch and sit there and think that it's over, that there's no adventures left. But you've pushed back against that.
Yes. And I think, I think my generation, I was a teenager and a young woman in the early 70s. And so we were very rebellious. We were challenging authority. We were, trust no one over 30. And so I think that my generation is coming to aging with a very different attitude than our parents or our grandparents. And so I don't think I am alone in not sitting on my couch, because I am in touch with so many, primarily older women who are really saying, oh, finally, this is my time. I can be the painter I always wanted to, or I could, go back to school, or I could just be in my garden and be contributing to my community. And so I think, again, that we are doing a lot of things to reinvent aging that aren't necessarily being represented adequately in the larger cultural framework or social or the media.
Man, when I listen to you talk, I know to some extent you're sorry that your story has become about age, but you are such a powerful and important spokesperson about it that you're doing the world a whole lot of good. And you do say that you no longer feel like, quote, the cocky badass that you were as a teenager, or the accidental icon that you were in the 60s. And at some point you felt like you stopped being a unique person and became a brand. You forgot that you had a body. You say, I colluded with in my own disappearing by becoming an influencer in the capitalistic sense of the world, not an influencer of cultural change as you originally started out to be. So what do you feel these days about influencer culture? Are you moving away from that?
Oh, I haven't done that for almost 3 years. And so by that, I mean, doing sponsored posts and being paid, right? Because originally I was a blogger. And at some point during the decade that I was doing this, the word influencer started to come into the picture. And Instagram began to change from when I first started, when it was a lot of creative people sharing their work and having a platform to be seen that didn't involve gatekeepers. But over time, Instagram started to have advertising, and it became more of a marketplace and a place for selling. And so when I started to work predominantly on Instagram doing sponsored posts, was when I really began to lose myself and to sort of, just become swept up in this constant scroll of social media. I was doing most of my work on it. I was spending hours on it. And when I wrote my memoir, I looked, writing a memoir is wonderful because you can go back and get epiphanies and reflect. And up until 2019, I was still teaching full time as a professor. And in 2019, after 20 years, I made a decision to retire and just do accidental icon. And looking back, I think that's when I began to lose myself, because as long as I had one foot in the real world, I could play around in the digital world, but once I was all into that digital world, I just, I completely lost myself, and I understand why. But I fortunately started to feel very unhappy, and then the pandemic came and gave me the time and space to reflect and understand what had happened to me, and helped me to come to the decision that that is not what I really wanted to be doing.
It takes courage to move away from something that you're as successful at it as you were. But so let's talk about influence of a different type, the influence that you've had on culture, and specifically the feedback that I'm guessing you have received over the years and continue to get from younger women who fear growing older, who fear invisibility, whose self-image is totally wrapped up in a body that is rapidly changing. What kind of feedback have you gotten from younger women who see the way you live your life?
Well, I think what was interesting was in 2016 was when the Valentino ad came out, and there was an ad with Joan Didion for Celine. And I think that moment was a transgressive moment, because it was the first time that a big fashion brand had an advertisement with two older women who were naturally aging. We both had white hair, we both had wrinkles. And I think I was a professor, she was a writer. And a lot of young women at that time were inspired by that, because they had this image of sort of, two women who were not classically gorgeous with gray hair and wrinkles, but they were women of substance. And so I think they felt, okay, I can still be a woman of substance when I'm old, and that was attractive. And I think over time, like other social movements, society will come back and there is a backlash. And so I think now we have these two, what I think are dangerous, polarized views of aging. On one hand, you have this decline narrative that we'll be disabled and we'll have dementia and we'll be dependent and we're a burden on our family and a burden on society and wrecking it for all the generations behind us. But now you have this other older person who appears ageless, who is exceptionally fit, running marathons at 80, highly resourced, very hot, and who is completely independent and needs nothing. And I think we've taken the positive view of aging too far. I think we had to be very positive because there was so much negativity. But I think those two polls reflect maybe 3% of the aging population on either end. And the vast majority of us are in the middle. And so where have all these great things about aging, but there's things about aging that suck. And, we're trying to live our lives. And I saw something this week in Business Insider where the vast majority of retirees in this country are living on $40K a year and less. So those two polls are not adequately reflecting the way we are aging. And, I call it, along with my friend Elizabeth White, who is also someone you should talk to, the hidden middle. And my project now is I want to represent and help tell the stories of that hidden middle.
I love every bit of that. And I totally agree. There has to be a lot of nuance among those who are talking about positivity in aging. And if you haven't paid any attention to the narrative that Growing Bolder tries to espouse, I wish you would. And I'm not saying we do it perfectly every time, but we always talk about the fact that we can't ignore, the reality of our mortality, and the fact that no matter what your condition or age is, I do believe we all still have the ability to at least extract moments of joy from our life. And I think that's a message that a lot of people need to hear, because our culture would lead us to believe that it is a downhill slide in every way, as we get older. Do you
Yes,
agree with that?
I 100% agree. And I think that, like everything else in our society right now, aging has been commodified, right? And you're told, if you buy this product, it's going to help you feel better. And if you buy this product, it's going to make you look better. And I love what you said about these moments of joy, because they could be found for free. They don't require resources. They can happen multiple times in the day of a life of an older person. And even us looking at death squarely in the eye. And I had a young woman who I've been encouraged that younger people are thinking they might want to start breaking through the fear. And she asked me if I thought about dying a lot. And, I was honest about it. I said I would be lying if I said I didn't, because there are times I wake up and I have this sense of foreboding and, that something's coming. But I think more often facing it makes me absolutely want to cherish and make the most of every single moment that I have in my life right now, in a way that perhaps I didn't cherish as much when I was younger.
We've interviewed, Lyn, probably more active centenarians. And when I say active, I don't mean running marathons, but they're still enjoying life. Let's let that be the definition of active, than any media organization. And one of them told us that she constantly looks, and she like you is a former college professor, and she said that she looks every day for life's little miracles that surround us all, if only we will take the time and develop the ability to stop and listen to them. And thank you for that. I love that. I hate to almost bring this conversation back to fashion in a sense, but this to me isn't really fashion, because you write in your memoir that the clothing that you have chosen to wear over the different decades of your life reflects the focus of your life at that time, tells the story of who you are and who you wish to be. And the final picture in your book, I think it's the final picture, it's a gorgeous photo. It's a view in your gardening clogs, your oldest, most faded jeans, and a pajama top. So what is the story that you are telling today?
I think the story that I'm telling today it's very reflective of my life that has happened for me since I moved outside of New York City and up to the Hudson Valley to be closer to my family, to my grandchildren, to, being in quarantine in New York City in a small apartment, not seeing my family. It really shook me in a very powerful way. And it caused me to really rethink how I was living my life and what was important to me. And so, most of what I'm doing now, I'm wearing denim jeans. I love denim jeans. When I was a teenager, they were a symbol of rebellion. They're a symbol of work. The pajama top is, now's my time to rest. And I was talking about this with someone the other day, that I'm still evolving, I'm still reinventing, but I've given up this thing that I call the striving, which was part of my younger life. And now I just do the things I do for the enjoyment of them. And so this notion that I am allowed to work, but I am allowed to rest at the same time. The pajama top is made of silk. It's very light, so it's not a burden. It's very representative of how I feel my life is now and how I want to live it, at least during this time.
Hmm. Your book is called How to Grow Old. And the truth is, while there are some broad strokes that apply to everybody, there certainly is no one way, no right way. It is definitely a highly individual trip. But there have to be some broad strokes that do apply to most. Well, what do you think, Lyn, is the biggest key? If someone says, all right, you wrote a book, said how to grow old, what's the most important skill that we need to develop?
Well, I think you alluded to it, right, in your introduction when you said, I mean, probably the only thing that we can control about being old is how we choose to think about it. And I'm sure you've heard of the researcher Becca Levy, who has shown that if you have negative thoughts about being old or getting old as a younger person, that you are impacting your future health. You are going to be at higher risk for cardiovascular problems. You are going to take 7 years off the end of your life. So how you think about it's not just that you're going to feel better about yourself because you're thinking about it positively. It's that you're going to impact your physical health as well. So I think that would be the one takeaway, because I am a real proponent that aging is a unique experience. It really has a lot to do with our genetics, our social position, the institutions that we interact with. And again, depending on our social position, can be oppressive or not. And so I think the other phrase I like to use is that aging is a transaction between a mind, a body, and a particular environment.
I love that. So as a woman who does not have a Pollyannish view of aging, as someone that's not afraid to talk about her mortality, as someone that acknowledges the struggles of aging, but yet continues to find new things to inspire her. My final question, Lyn, what do you think about your next 10 or 15 years? What are you optimistic? Are you excited? What do you think about growing older?
I am always excited because I am a person who is always becoming. And, as long as I'm remaining involved in the world, I am learning new things every day. I am always growing. I am always moving forward, and I am always reinventing. And so what that will be will depend on my health and other things that I can't control. But I know that I will always bring my creativity to whatever challenge may come my way. So I'm very open to just kind of plunging in and seeing what happens to me. And I'm taking that same approach to getting older.
Well, congratulations on your book, and thank you for your immense contribution to changing the culture of aging for all. And if it's okay, allow me to close by reading 4 sentences from the epilogue of your book. 4 sentences that you did mention a little bit early on, but I think we all should try to embrace when we're thinking about and understanding the years ahead. And this is what Lyn writes in the epilogue. The next decade stretches before me like a new blank notebook, waiting to be filled with classes to be taken, essays to be written, mistakes to be made, and serendipitous occasions. There will be losses and gains, good times and bad, I will probably lose my way and find it again. I feel that little sliver of excitement that comes with asking myself, what now? Lyn Slater, I love that. And folks, believe me, you don't have to be a woman and you don't have to know or care anything about fashion to not only be inspired by her book, but to be transformed by it. It's called How to Be Old, Lessons in Living Boldly from the Accidental Icon. It will change the way you think about age. It will help you in your ability to extract the most joy out of every moment. And of course, her Instagram is Accidental Icon. Our thanks once again to Lyn Slater.